Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Our next event is the Dr. Hal Baumgarten D-Day Commemoration Ceremony. It will begin in just a moment. I ask that you please take your seat. If you are currently looking for a seat, there are still seats available all the way to the right of the room. If you are choosing to stand, please make sure that there is enough room for the color guard and wheelchairs to move through due to various processions that are a part of today's event. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be getting started soon.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get started, the crowd that's back in over here, we have plenty of seats right on down over here. So if you'd like to sit down, please join us. So good morning and welcome to the Dr. Hal Baumgarten D-Day Commemoration Ceremony. I'm Peter Crane, Vice President of Education and Access here at the National WWII Museum. And it's my honor to join you today to celebrate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It's my pleasure to direct your attention to our most honored guests this morning, the soldiers, sailors, and airmen, Holocaust survivor, and even member of the French resistance who served in and helped win World War II. Please join me in welcoming them as they enter the Freedom Pavilion. Wow. We're honored to have 10 World War II veterans, Holocaust survivors, and a French resistance fighter with us here today. 3 of these veterans with us today were part of the D-Day invasion 80 years ago today. They are Tolly Fletcher, who served in the U.S. Navy. Robert Bob Lowry, who also served in the Navy. And George Stites, who served in the U.S. Army. But while we're commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day today, it's important that we remember World War II was a truly global conflict. We have 6 other Americans who served in other operations and theaters around the world. Thomas Connors served in the U.S. Army. Norris Morvant served in the U.S. Army. Benny Robichaud served in the U.S. Army. Windsor Van Allen served in the United States Army. Daniel Wagner served in the United States Army Air Forces. I mentioned that we have one veteran of the French resistance, Nicole Spangenberg. I'm going to deviate for a moment. You know, as a teenager, Ms. Spangenberg served in the French resistance, assisting with daring missions to aid her country in the struggle for against Nazi occupation. So it's amazing to have you with us here today. This is not an easy one, because we're honored to have our dear friend Ann Levy with us here today. Ann not only is a Holocaust survivor, but she's also one of our volunteers at the museum and has done so much to help this museum. I invite you to visit the Liberation Pavilion, where in our Holocaust exhibit we talk about Ann. Now, those are the ones that I mentioned, but I hope we have some others in the audience. Do we have any other World War II veterans, home front workers, or Holocaust survivors with us here today? If there are, please stand or wave. Or for those of us online, let's give all of them who are watching a round of applause. It's our honor to pay tribute to them and their service every day here at the National World War II Museum. So now, to officially begin our program, please stand as the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard presents our nation's colors and the Victory Bells perform the French and American national anthems. Following the anthems, please remain standing for the invocation from Rabbi Scott Hoffman.
Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Qu'entre nous de la tyrannie, l'étendard sanglant élevé, l'étendard sanglant élevé. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils viennent jusque dans vos bras, égorger vos fils, vos campagnes. Aux armes, citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, qu'un saint empereur abreuve nos sillons. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Dear friends, it's my honor to share a few words with you today on this 80th anniversary of D-Day. And I thank the Scher family for extending this invitation. The Scher family, like my own, like many Jewish families, includes from that generation both those who survived the Holocaust and those who served in the armed forces. But this is not a matter of chance or serendipity. I look at it as a matter of causality. Let me explain. When the troops came up, the Allied forces came up on D-Day, as bloody as the remainder of the war was, it brought it to a faster end. And were there no D-Day, and had the war in Europe ended simultaneously with the war in Japan, had the entire war ended in August of 1945, here is a little counter-history for you. Experts say that 10,000 Jews every week lost their lives until the Allies arrived at the gates of those camps. Meaning that the D-Day landing among Jewish lives alone saved roughly 150,000 souls. And if you extrapolate that 80 years forward, some 50,000 to 750,000 of our Jewish brothers and sisters would not be alive today were it not for the bravery and courage of those soldiers 80 years ago. And I'm certain that many other ethnicities and nationalities, if we stop to think about it, have exactly the same story. And that the lives that were saved outweighed exponentially the considerable loss of life of D-Day itself. And when we say we owe those soldiers thanks for our freedom and our liberty, I would add perhaps we owe them thanks for having our lives. And so I ask you to pause for a moment and to pray. God, Master of the universe, we ask you to remember the brave men and women who gave so much of themselves, often gave their own lives in the service of the greater good. We pray that their memories will be an eternal blessing to their families. We pray that the stories of their heroism, each and every one unique, will not be lost in the mist of time. And we pray, most of all, that their ability to place at the top of the list the welfare of the world's future, and to place at the bottom of the list their own comfort and safety, will be for us an example and a light for our lamp for our feet, not only today, but in the many years ahead. And let us say amen.
Please be seated. Thank you, Rabbi Hoffman. You know, as we prepared for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we understood the importance of recognizing World War II and D-Day veterans, many of whom were dear friends of the museum and have passed away over the years. While we can't mention each one of them by name, we know that today we are joined in person and virtually by their children and grandchildren. Their participation today shows their commitment to honoring the legacy of their loved ones. If you are the spouse, child, or grandchild of a World War II veteran, please stand or wave your hand. What you see by all of those hands and all of those people standing is that although we only have roughly 1% of the 16.4 million Americans who wore a uniform in World War II, the ripples of time and their legacy is still with us in ever-growing numbers. So thank you for being here today. We're honored to join you in this shared commitment to sharing World War II veteran stories and preserving the legacy of their loved ones. I'd also like to recognize any other active duty military members, veterans, or immediate family members of those in uniform to please stand or wave. If you ever wore the uniform of our nation, please stand. Thank you for joining us today and continuing the legacy of service of those who fought to save freedom and democracy 80 years ago. I would also be remiss if I didn't recognize our former and current board members of trustees in attendance today or viewing online. Thank you for your attendance today and your continued leadership and support. Absolutely. And we also have some of our Patriot Circle members, charter members, and program supporters in attendance, so thank you for your continued support as well. "80 years ago today, the débarquement, the Allied landings on the coast of Normandy, sounded the first death knell of Nazi occupation of France. It would take weeks to break through the Nazi forces fighting in Normandy, but when it did occur, the advance was rapid. By mid-August, Parisians rose up against the Germans, and on 25 August, Paris was liberated. In less than a year, France was free, and Nazi Germany's tyrannical hold over Europe had ended. Today, we're honored to have our allies with us to commemorate this important day. Joining us on behalf of the French Republic is Rodolphe Sambou, the Consul General of France in Louisiana. Please join me in welcoming Consul General Sambou.
Dear veterans, dear Holocaust survivors, dear member of the French resistance, chère Nicole, mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, we call these men and women among us today the greatest generation because they fought for the greatest of the fights, democracy, freedom. Today is without a doubt a landmark in the history of D-Day remembrance. 80 years ago, men and women embarked on a journey to liberate Europe, a leap into the unknown, into courage and sacrifice that changed the course of the war for good and enabled decades of peace for an entire continent. This story is shared by millions of people around the world. Many families on both sides of the Atlantic have experienced this period in their own flesh and soul. Wounds and hopes turning into memories, warning, and also inspiration. France as a whole is pulsating to the rhythm of these international commemorations. We are proud to welcome President Biden today for a historical state visit. These are commemorations of a time revived, a time that has been revived because it is intended to honor and distinguish all the memories of this intense period in our history and in the history of the world, both military and civilians. A time that has been renewed, perhaps above all because of what happened on June 6, 1944, still echoes all the struggles of people and nations, of women and men on our planet, who today still aspire and fight to be able to freely exercise their sovereignty and freedom, fighting and rejecting all forms of oppression, exclusion, hatred, and all those forms that accompany them. 1944 was the summer when France, just like 1789 and the spirit of the revolution, reconnected with itself in a strange dialogue with history, mirroring the times where the French and the Marquis de Lafayette helped the American become a nation. That is why we are eternally grateful to the United States of America and forever bonded by this common history that strengthened our ties, a baton that has been passed from generations to generation and that is now crucial to transmit in the wake of a tragedy that we all thought was impossible to happen again, war in Europe. What is happening in Ukraine right now as we speak shows us that the fight for democracy and freedom is never finished, and that the return of totalitarian regimes is unfortunately a reality. We have to involve everyone, French, American, and beyond, in a shared memories in the service of future generations, to never forget and honor the legacy of those who fought, suffered, and died just to be free. And for those soldiers and veterans who fought so that we could be free, I want to say that you are for always at home on the French soil. Merci beaucoup, we won't forget you. Merci.
Thank you, Consul General Sambou. More than 160,000 men landed as part of the D-Day invasion of Normandy, France. From the airborne drops just after midnight to the men exiting the Higgins landing craft onto 5 beaches directly into enemy fire, we salute their service, their valor, and their sacrifice. This year, we're fortunate to have participation from 4 of the 5 American Legacy divisions who landed on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. The 1st Infantry Division, or the Big Red One, the 4th Infantry Division, the Ivy Division, the 29th Infantry Division, the Blue and Gray Division, and the Screaming Eagles of the 101st Airborne Division. You'll be hearing from them shortly. I hope I had the opportunity to hear the amazing sounds of the 29th Infantry Division Band who have joined us this morning. They traveled all the way from Virginia to be with us for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. They participated in multiple events already this morning. We started them off early. And I just wanted to say thank you to the 29th Infantry Division Band. Thank you so much. I also want to thank, and we'll call up in a moment, Brigadier General Eugene Ferris of the 4th Infantry Division, Colonel Terry Tillis of the 1st Infantry Division, and Colonel Trevor Voelkel of the 101st Airborne Division joining us today. Each of these military leaders are here to reflect on their division's role in D-Day and their legacy today. To begin these remarks, please welcome to the stage Colonel Terry Tillis, the Assistant Commanding General for Maneuver of the 1st Infantry Division.
Well, good morning. It's truly a privilege to be here today, and it was very humbling meeting some of these heroes today. And as I think about it, and I think about the greatest generation that's ever lived, and it's really hard to come up here and make remarks after recognizing and getting to meet you in person. You're the greatest generation, and you continue to do great things. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause. My name is Terry Tillis. I am a Big Red One soldier, and in preparation for remarks today, I thought to myself, how do you prepare remarks when you're at a museum where you have so many folks that have the historical facts? They can check your facts by going checking on the wall. If you think about that, that's also pretty challenging and daunting. Then you have living history as you're trying to present your division's perspective on this day. So it's 2024. I kind of did a hybrid COA. Course of action, and I've developed kind of a switch up. I'll start with the current day 1st Infantry Division. So we are currently headquartered in Fort Riley, Kansas, right in the heart of America. We are a 2-brigade combat team post, and inside of our division, we have the 16th Infantry Regiment, still represented by 1st Battalion, 16th, and the 18th Infantry Regiment, which is still represented by 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry. Names like Walt Ehlers and others are commemorated throughout our history in our division, and to this day, we still live the division motto, no sacrifice too great, no mission too difficult, and duty first. And I'm going to touch on those points today, but I'll start with a little historical narrative. The 1st Infantry Division, also known as the Big Red One, was comprised of the 16th, the 18th, and the 26th regiments, and they arrived in England in late 1943, early 1944, where they underwent extensive training to prepare for the Normandy invasion. The Big Red One already earned a distinguished history that included combat and allied landings at Iran, Algeria, Salerno, Sicily, as well as fighting in Tunisia, and widely known as a very experienced veteran division proven in amphibious warfare. They were a tough and gritty bunch. They could fight, and I'm going to air quote this for our current generation folks, they may have been a little rough around the edges when you talk about discipline when they had some time off. So they knew how to have a good time, but make no mistake about it, they were a tough division and a tough outfit, and they knew how to fight. After success during the liberation of Sicily, General Eisenhower chose the 1st Infantry Division for Operation Overlord. Major General Hubner, who had previously served the division during World War I, assumed command from Major General Terry Allen in 1943 and was directly tasked to ready the division for its most significant undertaking to date. I'll cover 3 points. I'll start with no mission too difficult. During the D-Day landings on June 6, 1944, the division was tasked the eastern half of Omaha Beach. The 16th Regimental Combat Team was assigned to assault the eastern half of Omaha, which was divided into 3 sectors: Easy Red, Fox Green, and Fox Red beaches. Simultaneously, the 29th Infantry Divisions participated in the landing at Omaha Beach, hitting Charlie, Dog Green, Dog White, and the Dog Red sectors. Opposing them, largely comprised of the 352nd Infantry, were German forces nearly at the strength of 6,800, and they had troops defending the front with fiercely opposed landing sites and engagement areas for our heroes. The 1st Division's landing craft approached Omaha Beach around 0630 hours, 0630, or 6:30 a.m. for our locals, and amidst German small arms fire from the bluffs and artillery firing posing significant threat. The Big Red One soldiers then faced a 300-yard dash across the beach to reach the base of the bluffs, and then German obstacles, including barbed wire, mines, hindered their progress. As those heroes leapt from their landing crafts into the choppy waters off Omaha Beach, many of the landing crafts had drifted off course due to the changing sea conditions, and some of the watercraft pilots found themselves depositing soldiers just a little bit off course from their assigned invasion beach. German small arms fires from the bluffs covered the approaches and fired upon the soldiers, while artillery fire splashed amid the landing craft in the English Channel. The challenging terrain, overwatched by a very well-planned obstacle effort, made the mission extremely difficult. The soldiers who headed for Omaha's 4-mile-wide beach would have to navigate a 300-yard gap, and soldiers had to make their way through a mixture of those German obstacles, some of which were protruding above the low tide. Then halfway to the bluffs, the end of that tidal flat was a raised shingle ledge of sand and stone. There the Germans had placed thick belts of barbed wire, and that shingle was the first spot on an otherwise open beach to offer their troops any cover from the machine gun fire. There was still another 100 yards to go before they reached the base of the bluffs. However, more wire mines awaited them. As the Big Red One fought across the sand, the Germans maintained a steady stream of fire from those elevated positions. As the bulk of American infantry was held up at the shingle, some soldiers moved to the water to seek shelter behind the German beach obstacles. However, by noon, the Big Red One had cleared the Germans from the beaches and the bluffs within its area of operations. Point 2, no sacrifice too great. During the Normandy campaign, units of the 1st Infantry Division suffered 30% casualties in the first hour of the assault on Omaha Beach. Those casualties on Omaha Beach were the worst of any invasion on D-Day, totaling 2,400 suffered by U.S. forces. Of that number, 1,174 were from the Big Red One, and over 300 were killed in action. Although the sacrifice was great, the 1st Infantry Division's bravery and actions were pivotal in securing that beachhead, facilitating future offensive operations. With follow-on operations occurring at Marigny to support action on to St. Lo and to finish the campaign, it was clear the Big Red One played a critical role in contributing to the Allied victory in France and across Europe. Several heroes sacrificed their lives on that day. They served a cause larger than themselves, a purpose to defend freedom and remove the evil that had seized most of Europe. Heroes like Medal of Honor awardee Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith of the 16th Infantry Regiment, who charged the open beaches multiple times under intense fire and guided 2 U.S. tanks into a position to destroy enemy positions. Medal of Honor awardee technician 5th grade John Pender of the 16th Infantry Regiment, who exited his landing craft 100 yards offshore under devastating enemy machine gun fire and artillery fire, who was also wounded 3 times as he made 3 trips across that beach to secure radio equipment, which was pivotal because that radio equipment needed to be established in a line of communication so that we could synchronize naval artillery fire and our aviation assets in support of the ground maneuver. Point 3, duty first. The Big Red One heroes, the ones who fought that day, through seasickness, weighted down with 70 to 120 pounds on their backs as they jumped off those landing crafts and into that water. And just think about the sheer terror that they experienced. They fought through those multiple obstacle belts. They fought through the fear of death. They fought for the soldier next to them. They fought for a purpose larger than any single one of them. And that purpose, ladies and gentlemen, is the Big Red One. No mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great. Duty first.
Thank you, Colonel Tillis. It hits me that he has the same job today that General Willard Wyman had when he led his troops across the beach that day. The legacy continues. Now please join me in welcoming to the stage Brigadier General Eugene Ferris of the 4th Infantry Division, Assistant Division Commander for Maneuver.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to start thanking the band. You guys are fantastic today. Let's give them a round of applause. They're doing great. So we're talking about a lot, but we don't talk about the 29th enough, and they're here to represent the National Guard. We're talking about our active duty, but we can't do it without our National Guard's partners, so it's really important. And if you know your D-Day history, they're also representing the Bedford boys of the 116th. So again, thanks for representing the state of Virginia. Thanks for being here for the blue and gray. It's fantastic. Rabbi Hoffman, great words today. Thanks for making me pause. Thanks for making me think. Thank you. Distinguished guests and veterans, right down here, these veterans especially, and fellow Americans, thank you for joining us here at the National World War II Museum. I'm honored to be part of today's remembrance, as I have previously served in the 82nd, the 101st, and the Big Red One. Now I have the privilege of serving in the storied 4th Infantry Division, the IV Division, in the same duty position as one Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt, one of the first American soldiers to step on the sands of Utah Beach. It's an understatement to say that I'm humbled. June 6th, the anniversary of Operation Overlord, a day we simply know as D-Day. The beginning of the end to World War II in Europe, a day that is celebrated across North America as well as across the Atlantic. Today is an opportunity to remember, to reflect, and to celebrate an accomplishment that seems more incredible with each passing year. A day that the free world unleashed the largest amphibious invasion force, and that force was full of citizen soldiers. And they went out to crack Hitler's fearsome fortress Europe and liberate those suffering under the tyranny of Nazi Germany. I challenge everyone today to reflect, not just on the heroism of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen, resistance fighters who fell in the surf, the sand, and the drop zones, but also reflect on the courage and resiliency required to drive forward to danger. The leadership required to inspire action against incredible odds, and the faith and commitment demonstrated by each service member to each other. They were truly a band of brothers. There is no doubt that every man was scared as they embarked on their Higgins boat, but something inside them, something allowed them to drive on to victory. That something, a voice, a spark, a spirit, that is what made them the greatest generation. West of 1st Infantry Division, the 29th Infantry Division on Omaha was the 4th Infantry Division, the Ivy Division. They hit Utah Beach at 0630. Hours of naval gunfire, hundreds of bombing runs, and thousands of paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines preceded their assault. Aboard the landing craft, teeth shattered. Misty cold, calloused hands gripped loaded rifles. Men shivered not with cold but fear. And they whispered prayers as they approached their target on the Normandy coast. It is often said that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and the 4th Infantry Division's attack on D-Day was no different. Poor weather and strong currents pushed the assault force nearly 2 kilometers south of their intended destination. Landing craft dropped their ramps on the serene French beaches. Ahead erupted artillery, and shrapnel tore through the air, and sand and flesh, and bullets cracked through the air and bone. The deputy division commander, one Teddy Roosevelt, the son of the Rough Rider himself, landed with that first wave. Amidst the chaos and despite early setbacks, Teddy Roosevelt remained steadfast in his commitment to the mission. "We'll start the war from here," he said, and the I Division drove on. The 4th Division quickly established a beachhead, pushed inland while combat engineers cleared obstacles behind them. Paratroopers secured vital crossroads ahead of them. Young men, like a 19-year-old infantry corporal named George Stites. He's right there. He helped that I Division secure the beach and later the vital port of Cherbourg. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of the end. Some of the toughest fighting was yet to come. George and his fellow soldiers continued to push across Europe with the 4th ID, fighting through the hedgerows and across France, through Belgium at the Battle of the Bulge, and ultimately to victory in the Nazi-occupied Germany. Corporal Stites, thank you for your service on D-Day and the days that followed. A grateful nation and a free world thank you, as does the 4th Division. The soldiers wearing the ivy patch came ashore 80 years ago today, and they built a legacy. It is a legacy that grew through the division's actions in places like Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And today, it is the soldiers of the I Division that stand on the borders between tyranny and freedom once more. Whether it is in Eastern Europe, on the borders of Poland and Ukraine, or in Northeast Asia, an Ivy soldier stands ready. Our soldiers stand upon the shoulders of giants. But rest assured, your Ivy soldier, if and when they are challenged, is ready and prepared to show the world they are the greatest of their generation. Today, the 4th Division remembers. We honor those heroes that came before us. We remember those that gave all they had for freedom. And we reaffirm our commitment and our responsibility to lead George's legacy, your legacy, all of our veterans' legacy forward, steadfast and loyal.
Thank you, General Ferris. Yesterday, General Ferris and I had the opportunity to tour the museum's D-Day exhibit. And the point wasn't lost on me that he is in the same position, as he mentioned, as Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt had on that day. And just as Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt made a fateful decision on where that would start, and people don't really realize the criticality of that decision, we still have generals today who are standing and ready to do the same kinds of decisions and make the hard calls and lead our soldiers that we had 80 years ago today. So now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Colonel Trevor Volkel, the commander of the 1st Brigade Combat Team of the 101st Airborne Division.
Mr. Crean, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly an honor to be here before you today. To all of our World War II veterans, we are here because of you. We are standing on the shoulders of these giants. And ladies, some giants a little smaller than others, but no less important. Thank you so much. Please, another round of applause. December 7th, 1941 was a day that lived in infamy, thrusting the U.S. into World War II. June 6, 1944, is a day in many regards that lives in admiration. Admiration for its success in turning the tide of World War II. Admiration for the 160,000 brave young soldiers willing to fight and, if necessary, die. Admiration for what D-Day means to our nation. No other operation so clearly defines what our country, the United States of America, stands for, and the cost it is willing to endure for the cause of democracy and freedom. Today's ceremony is tremendously important to our community as it honors the sacrifices and actions of the Allied forces that participated in Operation Overlord, to include 101st soldiers and soldiers from our 1st and 4th Infantry Divisions. The 101st Airborne Division, now Air Assault, remains connected to the legacy of our storied division and the bravery they exhibited on D-Day. On June 5th, 1944, paratroopers from the 101st painted their faces and prepared to board C-47 aircraft with the mission of seizing key terrain to secure the flanks of Omaha Beach and to prevent German counterattack. General Eisenhower visited the 101st and remarked, "I found the men in fine fettle, many of them joshingly admonishing me that I had no cause to worry, since the 101st was on the job and everything would be taken care of in fine shape." It has been said that this visit did more to boost the confidence of General Eisenhower than it did for the young paratroopers. 101st soldiers entered that day by parachute, by glider, and by landing craft onto Utah Beach with our 4th ID brethren. These brave Screaming Eagles jumped into the night and entered the fight amid the fiercest conditions possible. Blistering enemy fire targeted them from the instant they reached Nazi territory. Many of the paratroopers that day did not make it to their final objective. It is reported nearly 1,500 paratroopers from the 101st were captured or killed during those operations. But despite all the odds, the 101st fulfilled their mission that day. The beach was secured, the flanks protected, and even the division commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, gathered a handful of soldiers and attacked the village of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, helping to successfully seize a key junction with 4th Infantry Division. And that fight would continue through the Netherlands, Operation Market Garden, to Bastogne, and the Battle of the Bulge, to the Eagle's Nest. So we must continue to honor and dedicate ourselves to the legacy of the Screaming Eagles that participated in D-Day. The current history and the current 101st, our priority remains to fight further, to fight faster, and to fight our enemy in the fiercest of conditions. Like our predecessors jumping into the unknown, it is our identity as the 101st, our culture, and our ability in providing a unique capability to our nation. Though we may no longer be an airborne division, we continue to carry the name. We are now the only air assault division in the Army and the only air assault division in the world. Air assault for us means more than just a name or a badge that we wear on our chest. Air assault is our mastery of every aspect of air assault and helicopter operations. Being air assault now is a mindset that was built from the legacy of those that came before us. Our division has transformed, but we maintain the fighting spirit of our World War II heritage and veterans. We remain committed to the same words that the Supreme Allied Commander, General Eisenhower, imparted on the Allied Expeditionary Force on D-Day. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. So thank you for an opportunity to be here today. This event is not only to honor those who gave that last full measure of devotion, but it is a reminder as us, as citizens of this free nation, to dedicate ourselves to their unfinished work. The 101st we'll always be ready for our next rendezvous with destiny. Screaming Eagles and Air Assault. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Vogel. You know, the brigade combat team that Colonel Vogel commands traces its history to the 327th Infantry Glider Regiment. They fought their way across Normandy, and the club that his troopers wear on their helmets today reflects the history and traditions of the clubs worn on the helmets of their World War II predecessors. So I had the pleasure of being at Fort Campbell last month, and I can assure you that while they honor the past of World War II, they are staying current with the fights that are going on around the world today. D-Day has always been a significant day for the National World War II Museum. 24 years ago today, we opened our doors as the National D-Day Museum. In 2004, we expanded our focus to tell the story of the entire war and became the National World War II Museum. But despite the name change, the expansion of our mission, we've continued to pay tribute to the men who stormed the beaches on Normandy through our exhibits and educational programs. We continue to hold a special bond with those World War II veterans, and especially D-Day veterans, across the country. One such D-Day veteran was Dr. Hal Baumgarten. Dr. Hal, as he was known to the staff, was a dear friend of the National World War II Museum, and we miss him terribly. I would now like to welcome our next speaker, another great friend of the museum, Rose Scherer. Rose is the granddaughter of Dr. Hal and Mrs. Rita Baumgarten. So please join me in welcoming Rose to the stage to reflect on her grandfather's legacy.
So the rest of my family is actually in Normandy right now at the 80th anniversary ceremony, so you're stuck with me. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for your service to the veterans who are here, to the speakers who came before me. I really can't imagine your bravery and your courage, so thank you very, very much. And of course, I want to recognize my friend Ann Levy, and also Nicole Spangenberg. So thank you all so much for being here. My grandfather, Dr. Hal Baumgarten, referred to affectionately as Poppy by his grandchildren, and of course Hal, or Dr. Hal by his friends, was a real-life superhero, and I'll tell you why in a minute. His mentor, the late Dr. Stephen Ambrose, encouraged my grandfather to share his story. Dr. Ambrose went on to collect Poppy's oral histories for this museum, and so you can all see them here if you're interested. He was also determined to honor the memories of his fellow soldiers who were killed on Omaha Beach. He did so every chance he had. He spoke about them using his photographic memory and detailed recollections of their experiences and his own on D-Day during the landing in the first wave at Dahlgren Sector, where, in the course of 30 hours, he was badly wounded 5 times. There were 32 men in his landing vessel, and only Poppy and one other survived the landing. My grandfather, who always spoke articulately and passionately, was a featured speaker in this museum's opening ceremony in 2000 and continued to speak here frequently until his death on Christmas Day in 2016. The story about my grandpa and his fellow soldiers has appeared all over the world in many books, documentaries, accounts of the landing, seminars, presentations, and in educational lectures. He also wrote his own books. He told his story at speaking engagements, and he's featured in many documentaries. And of course, he was often interviewed for newspapers and magazines. My personal favorite was, I can't remember how many years ago, but he had this huge spread in People magazine, and I used to be a subscriber to People, so that was really exciting to see him in there. On March 17, 1944, only 2 weeks after he turned 19, Poppy learned he would be invading France. He was really scared, and he convinced himself that he would not live through the invasion. In the months leading up to D-Day, he was further rattled and saddened when 16 members of his 116th Infantry, including those in his boat team, were involved in an accidental explosion of a dud shell on a rifle range. This led to Poppy's transfer from Company A to Company B to replace the injured boat team. This transfer changed his life. In Company B, he met and became close friends with Private First Class Robert Garbett Jr. from Newport News, Virginia. To 19-year-old Poppy, Bob was a 25-year-old old man. It was on Bob's advice that my grandfather ditched his issued combat jacket. Bob said to his younger friend, "Hal, don't wear it because it will drown you." Poppy agreed, and in front of his new boat team members, he whipped out his ever-sharp ink pen and drew a large Jewish star on the back of his field jacket and printed "The Bronx, New York" around it. His new boat team members were astonished and understandably concerned of the horrors that the Nazis would inflict on Poppy if he were captured. They said, "Hal, if you get captured, the Nazis are going to cut off your balls." That was in his book. My grandfather knew that the Nazis were persecuting Jews, and in true superhero fashion, wanted them to know who he was. He was honored to give a speech at the dinner for the benefactors of this museum on June 5th, 2000, the night before the museum opened for the first time. Dr. Nick Mueller introduced my grandfather, and during his introduction, mentioned the field jacket with the Jewish star. Poppy had planned to talk about the jacket at the beginning of his speech, and he had to think really fast about how he would modify his speech. He stood up to give his speech and said, "I was wearing a special jacket on D-Day to let Hitler know who I was," and then he received a standing ovation. The night before the invasion, my grandfather had accepted that he was going to die, but wanted to be brave for himself and his buddies. Among all of the items that he was issued for his pack for the invasion was pliofilm bags to protect the weapons from the seawater and sand. Being the brilliant person that he was, Poppy instead covered the tip of his rifle with a rubber condom. And he used the rifle, so it worked. Around 3 a.m. on June 6th, Poppy and his boat team loaded into their small boat and set off. As icy waves tossed their small boat around like a matchstick, soaking the team and filling the boat with water, Poppy and his team bailed the water and vomit out of the boat with their helmets. My grandfather avoided becoming seasick by chewing gum and sucking on candy. At 6 a.m., their boat was lined up to land. Poppy had witnessed many of the other boats sink or get lost, and due to so many other boats not making it, it looked to him that they would be outnumbered significantly by the Nazis when they landed on the beach. In his boat, his buddy and mentor, Bob, smiled at him and made an okay gesture with his right hand. His boat reached the jog green sector at 6:40 a.m. as the boat to his left was blown up. There was blood, body parts, and pieces of equipment everywhere. Poppy was in hell and wondered, "When will I die?" Over the next 30 hours, my grandfather suffered 5 gruesome, serious, and painful injuries, including losing a significant portion of his face, teeth, and gums, and almost losing his leg. He experienced one of the saddest moments of his life when he discovered his best buddy, Bob's dead body, below the seawall. Many years later, Poppy learned that Bob was buried at a cemetery in St. Augustine, Florida, only 30 minutes from where Poppy lived in Jacksonville, Florida. And of course, he visited his grave. He also witnessed countless other buddies blown to pieces and spent many hours in a ditch surrounded by the dead bodies of his friends. Not wanting his family to be worried about him when he was being treated at the British Royal Navy Hospital, he was able to scribble a letter to them on June 12, 1944, saying that he had a scratch on his face and his foot, but was otherwise okay. 2 months later, Poppy finally made it home to New York. His parents, sisters, brothers-in-laws, nieces, and nephews came to visit him, but walked right past him and didn't initially recognize him because of his injuries. That broke his heart. My grandfather always wondered why God spared him on D-Day when so many others lost their lives, and he was inspired to give back. He lived with survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite it being beyond difficult, he told his buddies stories to their family members who otherwise would not have known what happened to their loved ones. He also wrote countless thank you notes to those who had helped him, and many letters to elected officials on behalf of his buddies who had survived to spread the message of their bravery. That was the kind of person my grandfather was. He was also a straight-A student, well-liked and well-respected by his classmates. He returned to college after he was recovering from his injuries, and he was elected the junior class president when he was at New York University. Before the war, Poppy had been a phenomenal athlete, which athleticism undoubtedly helped him survive on the beach. Despite his injuries, he was able to play baseball on the NYU baseball team. After graduating from NYU, he moved to Miami and obtained a graduate degree, and then he was a treasured teacher for many years in Palm Beach. He eventually became a physician, which he felt like was his higher calling, and he graduated from the University of Miami Medical School and then practiced as a general practitioner for 40 years in Jacksonville, Florida. He wanted to be remembered for what he did and requested that his gravestone read TAPS, T-A-P-S, standing for Teacher, Author, Physician, and Soldier. He also gave back by speaking frequently about his own D-Day experiences and those of his buddies. When people described him as a hero, he would say that the real heroes were those on his landing vessel who made the ultimate sacrifice of their lives that bloody morning on Omaha Beach. Over the years, Poppy spoke to thousands of people. When he spoke, he always mentioned his fellow fallen soldiers, referring to them by their full names, where they were from, and exactly what happened to them on the beach that morning. After the war, my grandfather also became active in Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans, and Military Order of the Purple Heart. His membership in those organizations provided him with the opportunity to interact with fellow veterans and share their stories of survival. In 1992, he was invited to attend a reenactment of D-Day on Lake Pontchartrain here in New Orleans. I was 7 and living here in New Orleans and also went. The reenactment was sponsored by the Eisenhower Center of the University of New Orleans, where Dr. Ambrose was the director. Dr. Ambrose introduced my grandfather to thousands of honored guests and New Orleanians. Dr. Ambrose later became Poppy's close friend and mentor. My grandfather described this amazing museum as Dr. Ambrose's brainchild and a dream come true. He was thrilled to be honored and speak at the museum's opening 24 years ago. He would be in awe of how far the museum has come in the past 7.5 years since his death. Thank you to all who have made that possible. He wrote in his book that the opening of the museum coincidentally corresponded with my confirmation from religious school, and he came in town a few days early to celebrate me. I had forgotten about this, but it was so heartwarming to read that in his book, and I didn't realize how memorable and important it was to my grandfather. My grandfather's friend, Tom Brokaw, described him as one of the greatest generation. I agree. He was brave and heroic to all, but to me, he was also an athletic, hunky, fun, and a loving grandparent. Some of my favorite memories are visiting him and Granny, who's in Normandy today, but I think she's live streaming, so hi Granny if you're watching. Visiting them in Jacksonville and spending countless hours swimming in the ocean with him. He taught me how to dive into waves. He did cartwheels on the beach, even into his old age. And when I was old enough, we were able to share a drink of Johnny Walker, his favorite, together. In addition to my confirmation, he came to my high school, college, and law school graduations, traveling cross-country for my college one. But the most meaningful of all was that he was at my wedding. He valued education and hard work, but I think he was proudest when I got my MRS. I'm sad that he died 2 years before my twins were born. He really would have adored them. He died during the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, which is the Festival of Lights, and my twins were born 2 years later during Hanukkah. So it was like he was sending me a message. He was also a true romantic. He loved music, especially Frank Sinatra and George Gershwin, and singing or humming a few bars of their songs. Music was a great comfort to him during his time on the LST-421, the Navy ship where he was administered first aid for 4 days immediately after being rescued from the beach. He also swept Granny off her feet. They talked for the first time when he was proctoring an exam that she was taking, and for as long as I can remember, I've considered them the most glamorous couple. Their love story is one for the books, and they were married for 67 years. Poppy treasured this museum. He was this museum's biggest cheerleader. June 6th has always been a meaningful date for my grandfather and for our family. Even though we miss him every day, we are especially today reminded that he is no longer with us. So it is with a heavy but a happy heart that I am here honoring my grandfather, Dr. Hal Baumgarten's legacy. He wrote in his autobiography that it is my desire that my grandchildren become good U.S. citizens and that they never forget their grandfather and D-Day. We won't forget you or D-Day, Poppy. Thank you all for coming to this commemoration ceremony and to the World War II Museum's team for planning this special program. And I will end my remarks the way that Poppy would have liked, with the battle cry of his Army Division, the 29th Infantry. 29, let's go.
We were in Company B now. Very nice guys. I only knew 5 of them. But I had my best buddy there with Robert Garbett Jr. of Newport News, Virginia. And he made a leather band for me for my watch, the watch that's in the D-Day Museum with his band now, because he saw my wrist was getting irritated from the hot weather. We marched down boardwalks to the little boats. The people who were making the V sign for victory, good luck Yanks, and so forth, because they knew it was the real thing. We knew it was the real thing. It was pitch black, 3:30 in the morning. The weather was horrible. The wind was going at 10 miles an hour. The waves were up to 20 feet. The boats hit the water, were thrown around like matchsticks. Every man was immediately soaked with the icy cold English Channel water. The first thing I saw, a Company B boat on my left, port side, blew up, hit a mine. We were showered with wood, metal, and body parts. When our ramp went down, the signal for every machine gun on that beach to open up on the exit to our ship. So Harold Donaldson, the lieutenant, was gunned down in the boat like you see in Saving Private Ryan. The fellow in front of me, Clarice Riggs, was machine gunned on the ramp. I dove in behind him. Only my left side of my helmet was creased by a bullet. They put these combat jackets on these guys. I didn't wear it because my best buddy, he said, "Hal, don't wear that jacket. It's liable to drown you." Now I listened to him because he was an old man. He was 25 years old, and I was only a kid of 19. So I listened to Robert Garbett. But anyway, I was standing in neck-deep, bloody water. There were a group of us running across the beach with our rifles at port arms, which is the rifle across your chest. When we got to about 135 yards away from the seawall, a machine gun spray came from the trenches up on the bluff. And I heard a loud thud on my right front, and my rifle vibrated. I turned it over. There was a clean hole through its receiver. A fellow named Nicholas Kafkalis was next to me. When this fellow was cut in half, crawled up to me with his last breath, handed me back both pieces of rifle. I spent years thinking why he would do a stupid thing like that. And I realized things were so one-sided on that beach. He wanted me to continue firing. I saw the machine gunner up there by the glare, the shine on his helmet. So I took my rifle. I shot at him. No more firing from that machine gun. A shell went off in front of me, 88 millimeter. It blew off this cheek, gave me a hole in the roof of my mouth. I had teeth and gums laying on my tongue. This jaw was shot away, left upper jaw. The cheek was flapping over my ear. And I looked into my left front, and Bedford Hoback of Bedford, Virginia, got hit with the same shell right in the face and went under the 4 inches of water. He was dead. Now, there are only 2 of us alive from my boat team, Charles Connor and myself. We had 85% casualties first 15 minutes. At the base of the seawall was my best buddy, face down in the sand, parallel with the wall. He was probably shot by a sniper. I was crying mad. I looked at my best buddy, and my bloody tears were dripping down. Still had this cheek open, and I saw the tears were bloody red coming down because here he was my best buddy for 2 weeks, and he made this band for me. He had a pregnant wife in Oxford, England, and he had read me all her mail, and he's a nice guy. I gave myself a shot of morphine right under the skin of my left hand. I'm laying in the dark with 6 dead bodies. German planes are going over. There's a guy with a machine gun down the road, an MG-42, I was sure, who was going to come down the road and finish me off probably. I thought we lost the battle. I had a dream, and I thought I heard my buddy, Robert Garbett, with a hand on my shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, Yankee boy, you'll be okay." But in fact, this fellow Stuart Bryan told me it was a German patrol coming down the road, searching the 7 bodies for cigarettes. And this German saw I was alive, and that was him talking to me. I went with the 29th Division to Normandy to dedicate a monument in Villeville-sur-Mer, 10-foot monument to the 29th Division. And after that, we went to the cemetery, and I walked around with my wife, and I saw Lieutenant Donaldson's grave, Nicholas Kafkalis, Bedford Hoback, and Captain Robert Ware, and I started to cry, and I looked up at my wife and knelt over the graves, and I said, "These guys can't talk anymore. Nobody will ever know what they did, what their names are, unless I speak about them." Now I met a very important friend who became my hero and my idol and my mentor, Dr. Stephen Ambrose. And he said, "Hal, don't just speak about D-Day, write about it."
Thank you, Rose, for sharing what your grandfather meant to you with us. It's our honor to remember him and what he and his buddies did on June 6, 1944. So as we approach the end of today's commemoration of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, I'd like to take a moment to thank Rabbi Hoffman, the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard, the 29th Division Infantry Division Band, Consul General Sambu, General Ferris, Colonel Tillis, Colonel Volker, and Rose Scher. Thank you for helping us commemorate a pivotal day in World War II history. However, before we conclude today's program, we do have a special treat for everyone in attendance. Since D-Day was also the anniversary of our opening, we'd like to celebrate the museum's 24th anniversary with each of you. So please welcome to the stage D-Day veteran, Tully Fletcher, who's going to join me in a special toast.
Thank you very much. I understand that today is primarily to celebrate the Normandy invasion, as well as all the other crafts that was in the service. And I have just one little thing to say that might be a little bit out of line with this procession. I would like to add all the people that were home that made it possible for us to do what we did. Yeah, thank you very much. And this is a wonderful program, as well as a magnificent celebration of all the veterans in this World War II museum. So thank you.
So Tully, here, would you do a toast quickly?
That's what I thought I did.
So ladies and gentlemen, to Tully Fletcher and everything he and his generation represent. Thank you. You're here.
Thank you. They had to get me drunk to do this.
He is a sailor, after all. What a way to end an impactful morning of events. We're here because of the brave men and women who joined us today and remember a battle and a war that they were instrumental in. In just a moment, Victory Bells are going to close out our program with a riveting and memorable performance. So please be sure to grab a dessert and champagne flute on your way out of the Freedom Pavilion as we continue our festivities. Thank you to all of you for joining us today to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We look forward to seeing you this evening at our General Raymond E. Mason Jr. Distinguished Lecture featuring Pulitzer Prize-winning author and historian Rick Atkinson. Now please join me in welcoming the Victory Bells back to the stage for an original rendition of Bob Hope's signature song, Thanks for the Memories.
Thanks for the memories. Oh, how the years go by in just the blink of an eye. We wish the best to all of you as these years multiply. Happy anniversary, cheerio and toodaloo. And thank you, we thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So much.
That concludes our ceremony. Thank you for joining us today.